Hey everyone, how's it going? Today, if you've been following along, I am in the process of installing long travel on a 2018 4Runner, and for today's quick installation video, I'm going to be going through the steps for the body mount shot plates for any tires larger than a 33 or 33 and above. And I basically am going to follow the directions from Total Chaos, and I have their plates. So the first thing you want to do is you want to measure 3.5 inches out from the frame here and mark that with a little tick mark. Or you could go ahead and cut your templates first. Both are interchangeable, but then you want to cut a template out. So you take the metal that's supplied, trace around it on paper, cardboard, whatever you want, and then cut that out. And then with that 3.5 inches, you're going to go ahead and place your template and trace around it. And so once you get that squared away, that'll give you an idea of what you're going to initiate the cut with. So that's the front. Underneath though, you can see I have it marked. The directions have it. The video I watched, I didn't really see a measurement, or they didn't say one, but I'm going with, there's a hole right here that I just tried to get that line inside and split the difference through the middle up here. So as you can see, there's that hole that I was talking about, and just try and follow alongside it. Now, I don't have my rims and tires mounted yet, so I'm going to be using one of my Raptor tires to get an idea, but I'm not going to burn these in until I get those mounted and able to mount onto the vehicle, so that I know I have everything I need size wise here and cut up, so that I can just tack it in and weld it shut. If I were to just do it now, I could run into the issue where it still rubs, so I don't want to go ahead and do that. But this is just the initiation right now, and then I'll get back to it once those are mounted and finish this up. So really what I did, like I said, I split the difference underneath. All I have to go through now is just use my cutoff wheel and cut this out. So let me do that. All right, now you can see that I'm in. This is cut away. I can do one of two things. First, I can take my template and match it up here, and there's a large gap in behind here where my fingers are, and if I ever to press it against there, I come back to the top side and you see how much overhang there is here I got to get rid of. And that's the whole purpose of this whole plate, is get rid of this piece here so that your wheels can fit in here. Or I can go, and the next part of this would be to trim away some of this plastic, because there's a seam in here for the body that you're gonna slice in two areas and fold over. So if I slice here, I'll probably have better access to cut the rest of this away, and then I can test fit the plate and then just set it there and see how my movement is. So I'm gonna mark this up, cut it away, and then go from there. Alright, the cam tabs are welded on there, they are painted. Turned out pretty nice. They fit, so the eccentrics are allowed to do their job. There's just a few minor things that I need to button up before this all goes back together. And first being, I need to mount this shock in here so that the reservoir, I can find out where it needs to be placed. There's two tabs that I have to weld onto here that I'll clamp that reservoir onto this location, so I need to figure that out. Secondary to that, this bump stop needs to come out, so you just take channel locks and you twist this out. It's threaded, and right here I have a spacer that needs to be welded to the top there and painted, and this would be an additional washer spacer for this stock one. And the body chop back here, that's going to be finished once the tires are all together. So that's the last part of welding that I'll have to do on each side in the front. And then here we have our steering. So this is a adapter, kind of a spacer that goes on here, and this screws in and it spreads the outer tie rod further out so that it can meet the knuckle. So literally just thread this on and then get the new tie rod end out, and that'll bolt to the knuckle once that's all together. But some cleanup items, and then I'm going to put this seal in, drive that in. The side seals are different for each side, so you'd have to take note of that and make sure that you buy the right seals, because the four-wheel drive's different. And I'll drive that in and kind of just work on these small items, show the finished product there, and then start bolting this back together. Finally have a few components bolted up here, and wanted to just point out what this process looks like when assembling upper and lower control arms with this spindle. First, you put the upper end, make sure you get your Zerk fittings mounted in there. This isn't that tight. I have to tighten this down and grease it all up, but I'm gonna do that whenever everything's here ready to go. Lowers, already showed how to do the lowers. I just have to put a tie rod end on this. The limit strap gets welded to right next to the bucket here, and then you bring it to this back mount here on the lower. And I already have the bump stop extension in there, so if I were to cycle this the whole way up, bump stop will hit right there. And really, there's on the directions it talks about how to put this uniball cup together. It comes zip tied with these spacers in here, and the directions talk how one spacer is different than the other. One's a larger circle, and then the top, I believe, is smaller. So those will go on the uniball, and then you just follow the diagram and put your bolt in here and get this top one together. The bottom, however, the uniball goes right into the bottom of the spindle, and then it sits right on top of the lower control arm like such. So you just have to, my advice, get your uniball loosely put into the spindle first, so that you can then set it on top of this control arm so that this doesn't tilt and go in cockeyed and, you know, ruin your finish on the powder coating or end up chipping this, because you might have to put some force together to get all this stuff aligned and pushed together. And then what I did is I got it to where it was straight through, and then I put this bolt through it, and you just put your lock nut down here. It's not tight because it is a lock nut, and I don't want to tighten it until I'm ready to go. Lastly, I put a new seal in here on the spindle, so I just drove that in with a dead blow. But all in all, this is what it looks like. And after I get this whole side assembled, I'll show just a time lapse of me going through putting all this stuff on the other side. So let me get the temporary shock in here and see what that looks like, and roughly that's about it. The rest of this side, put the differential seal is already in there, so I got to put the half shaft in, or the CV, I guess, and that'll come through. And then I put the hub together, new brake rotor, and then I have to put a new soft line on here, which that comes with the kit. So the soft line back in here, I just replace that, tighten this all up, and then it's almost done. So stand by for that, and yeah, I'll show you once it's all completed what the whole side will look like built out. Currently we're talking Total Chaos sway bar for long travel, and the method I used is very different than what you would expect to see on the directions. So if you're going to do custom work like this, maybe you can follow this. If not, their directions are very thorough and they provide everything you need. But the main difference between what they supplied and what I had to do was because of the KDSS. And with me tearing those components out, I needed to do some particular modifications. And right here is where there should be threads up through here that your traditional sway bar would mount right here. But with the KDSS, the ram came the whole way to about where my hand is. So what I decided to do, this isn't thick enough for threads, so they provide a spacer that is aluminum that's 1 inch thick. And that spacer is because you need to be able to clear your lower radiator hose with that sway bar. So instead of using aluminum, I went ahead and used a 1x1 piece of steel, machined it, put threads in it, and I'm going to weld that on here, and then the bushings will mount up to the bottom of that metal bar, and then I can mount the sway bar the whole way in, just as if it were a normal non-KDSS rig. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'll show you the steps that I used to get this thing mounted. I'll weld it in there and show you what the finished product looks like, and maybe leave some comments there at the end. So stand by.
Did you move this?
So now what I'm working with, you can see I have a square marked off here. I need to take the mounts that I made, the spacers for the sway bar, and weld those to the frame. Since this was a KDSS model, it doesn't have the threaded holes or the setup for a traditional sway bar, so that's why I am using steel bar that I drilled through and tapped holes so I can emulate that with this bracket. I had to also cut part of the weld off of this. This is a mount for the ram on the KDSS, so I had to just flush this up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to weld that plate in here, and then that way I can take this bushing and screw it into that. And once I get that welded in, same goes for the other side. You can see I have the mark there. I'll get that cleaned up, welded in, and then I'll show you what that'll look like. Now that you can see the limit straps are in, one thing you want to check is the clearance between this top uniball and the control arm. So what you do is you take, I'm just going to use my feeler gauges, but you want to have 1/4 of an inch clearance between the cup and the top of this spacer and the uniball. So all you need to do there is just make sure that it doesn't droop down the whole way, and that strap catches it to not pass that tolerance. So what I'll do here is make sure that that 1/4 inch is good to go, and then tighten this strap so that I make sure it doesn't ever travel past that. But the strap will lose tension over time. It'll just start to stretch, so you do have to adjust it, and that'll just be part of the maintenance on this whole long travel kit. So the good news is the shiny, beautiful Kings have arrived, but as I get this fitted, I'm trying to see how this will all work out, and it seems as if this reservoir, I would love for it to go along the frame here, you know, parallel to the ground, but this hose is just massive, so it's gonna most likely need to be canted like this. So what I need to do is get in here and cut this bolt from the body mount. So I'm going to trim that or slice it off, and then I should be able to weld these tabs in here so I can get this reservoir mounted. And then once I do that, hopefully that goes according to plan, and then I can put the axle shaft in here and finish out this spindle, and then tighten down bolts and assemble this hub. So I'm going to get this cut and then this test fit, and then I'll show you what I'm working with before I go on to that sway bar. Alright, as you can see, I have the hub back and assembled. Bolts are tightened, so real quick I just wanted to point out, alright, so starting up here, the King here has through bolts that you thread into this top plate, unlike the old that had studs that came out the top. But these are 14mm, and they get torqued down to 35 foot-pounds, all three of these up here. Then you have your through bolt for your upper control arm. That was just torqued to 85 foot-pounds. I ended up taking this little bracket off just to push these brake lines back, and I was able to get a torque wrench in there, 85 foot-pounds. And then this upper uniball, that was torqued to 100 foot-pounds. The bottom ball joint down in here was also torqued to 100 foot-pounds. And then that's kind of where I stopped. So for the rest of this hub, these were 60 foot-pounds. This will get 172, and your caliper here is 90. I have to tighten down the shock itself, these cam tab bolts, and then the rest of this end link and steering components. I'm not going to do that just yet. I'm just getting this close enough so that I can test fit and make sure that this is at the right height that I want. I could adjust this on the vehicle, this collar, but it'd just be easier if it were taken off and done on a bench with a spring compressor. Overall though, the next part of this is going to be just that test fitting and making sure that I have this mounted where I want it. But I will get back when I get further along and point out another couple things that I run into to help out the next guy. All right, stay tuned.